the Econometric Society, Dr. Mahendra will talk about the February, right? Is very happy to, I think, organize this function. Professor Nagar, of course, is known, I think, very well, and I must also mention that the Econometric Society brought out a special issue of the Journal of Quantitative Economics a couple of years ago. The issue was guest editors were Amanullah, his student, and a colleague of Amanullah in US. And I was invited to give the introduction to that volume. I think there I mentioned the major contributions of Professor Nagar in Delhi School of Economics and other places in India. I think it is the glorious stint of Nagar in India. I think that was the title of my paper in that special issue. I think just to give the background for researchers in quantitative economics and econometrics under the age of 45 who have the Mahendra Award. So many people have been awarded the Mahendra Award. It is in both national and international. Some are national. This award is meant for people between under 65. I think just to give a background, the first award went to Kaushik Basu, and the second award went to Bhaskar Datta, third went to Dilip Mukherjee. I think now this is the next round of awards. This is meant for the year 2020. I think any of Dr. Mahendra will speak about that. Now I will, of course, Dr. Barman is the executive vice chairman of the Rice Trust, which administers these awards. I will ask him to speak for a few minutes about the award.
As Professor K. Krishna mentioned about Professor Nagar, I think he was a great scholar. I had the fortune to be his student when I joined Indian Statistical Service. He taught us simultaneous system of education. It was greatly mathematical, but I think it was full of substance. Of course, in the course of time, we had Professor Nagar as a part of our econometric society. I used to meet sometimes. I think it's a great personality, and it is his family after his passing away who gave the money for the institution instituting this fellowship and award. And it was quite a handsome money through which we have been giving this award. So we have right now the award for all the groups up to 35 years, say Munawar, then Maulana is up to 45, and then 45 to 65 is Nagar, and beyond 65 is C.R. Rao award. Now we have a system. We announced this in the media. Economic and Political Weekly is one media where it is given in details. We look forward to nominations as well as application. And there is a system of jury who goes through the kind of their publications, the collects and others. Based on this, jury decides about the award. So we follow a process which is which is transparent. And for 2020, we went through this process. We have got two very distinguished, the economist, econometrician, quantitative economist for the award. And the Indian Econometric Society is very happy to honor the people and their contributions to see that the econometrics research becomes that we can encourage the researchers through this process. So that's what I thought I should tell you, that we can look forward to young their work to be so they can aspire for the awards that we give. I think I put this one. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for telling us about the awards and the details about the same. Now I request Professor Mahendra sir to declare the names of the awardees for the Professor A. Nagar Award for year 2020.
Thank you. I was also fortunate to attend Professor A. Nagar's classes at Delhi School of Economics. I was attending Econometrics 1, so he was teaching, excellent teacher, and of course Econometrics 2, Professor Krishna used to teach. In fact, we ranked the teachers in 1 year, both Professor A. Nagar and Professor Krishna were among the top 3 when we ranked 20 or 25 faculty that time. So it was excellent, both Nagar and Professor Krishna, excellent teachers. Now I am happy to declare the Professor A. Nagar Award, fellow award winners, the 2 distinguished persons. And first, Professor Arunava Sen from ISI. And next, Professor Sugata Marjit, presently with IIT. So this is for the year 2020. Thank you.
I request the awardees to kindly come on the stage. Dr. Arunava Sen sir, to please be on stage to receive the award.
Sir, please come on the front, sir. Sir.
Thank you so much, sir. Now I request Dr. Sugata Marjit sir to kindly come on stage to receive the award.
Sir, please come.
Thank you so much, sir. Now we begin the presentation. So I'll start with Dr. Arunava Sen. He is presently the Professor, Planning Unit, Indian Statistical Institute, New Delhi. He has done his PhD in Economics from Princeton University in 1987. His key research interest areas includes game theory, social choice theory, mechanism design, voting and auctions, among others. He has to his credit more than 50 papers published in reputed journals, books with international publishers like Oxford University Press, Cambridge University Press, Springer Nature, etc. 11 PhDs have been awarded under his supervision. He is also part of various editorial committees, holding the responsibility of one of the journals known as Journal of Mathematical Economics, Economic Theory, Social Choice, Welfare, etc. He has been the president of Social Choice and Welfare Society, member of Council of the Econometric Society, member advisory board, Society of Economic Design, etc. He was awarded with the Mahalanobis Memorial Medal by the Indian Econometric Society in 2000, Infosys Prize for Social Sciences in 2012, Condorcet Lecture, 11th meeting of the Social Choice and Welfare Society, Seoul 2018, and many more. It's a great occasion to invite you, sir, to deliver the acceptance lecture on this occasion. Please.
Thank you very much. I'm deeply honored, to receive this award. So I'd like to thank the Econometric Society, the Indian Econometric Society, for believing that I'm worthy of this award. This award holds special significance for me because Professor Nagar was also my teacher in the master's program. I remember the very first lecture that I attended at the Delhi School of Economics. I think it must be July of 1978. That was taken by Professor Nagar, his basic statistics course. Thereafter, I took what was then called Group E, which was 6 courses in econometrics in my second year, and Professor Nagar taught one of those 6 courses on simultaneous equation methods. And I remember learning about, he taught his famous paper on the small sample properties of K-class estimators and stuff like that. So it was we all know that Professor Nagar was made outstanding contributions to econometric theory, but he was also, I would say, the embodiment of the ideal scholar. He was, humble to the point of self-effacement. He was kind. He was patient. So it's indeed a great honor for me. I must also mention that I'm delighted that Professor Krishna is on the stage here because he was also one of my teachers, in the same, during my master's thing. In fact, he took simultaneous equation methods 1, and I see one of my fellow classmates, TCA, right here. But anyway, it's a pleasure to to receive this award in the presence of Professor Krishna, another scholar whom I deeply respect and admire. So let me also say that I never pursued econometrics research. In fact, I never took another course in econometrics in my academic career, but what I learned in econometrics at the Delhi School of Economics was sufficient for me to pass every econometrics qualifying exam that I had to take thereafter without having to take any more courses in it. So I'm really very grateful for that. Anyway, so I thought I would. I wasn't sure what to what to say except to talk a little bit about some recent research of mine. So one of the things I've been doing, and it's an application of what is fashionably termed as market design, a sort of discipline of economic theory which looks at the design of economic institutions in situations where monetary transfers are not possible. So I thought I would just say, make a brief presentation on a sort of an ongoing paper, a research project of mine, which is with several co-authors. 2 of them are my students, Shobhendu Sarkar and Sonal Yadav, my colleague Devashish, and Jay Sethuraman, who's at Columbia. So what we have, the problem that we are studying is the transfer of high school teachers, right? And we know that public schools widely differ in teacher-student ratios, and the Right to Education Act in India mandates government schools to maintain prescribed teacher-student ratios. And there are ways to improve teacher-student ratios. For instance, new hiring and things like that. But what we will consider here are transfers. You get transferred from one school to the other. And the basic issue that we want to study is, are there, what are good ways to do this while keeping in mind the requirements of schools and the preferences of teachers, right? So that's really the key feature of this problem. Now, again, as I said, that there are no monetary incentives. We are taking certain liberties here because we are theorists. As long as our assumptions broadly conform to reality, we are okay. And the point is that salaries are fixed. There may be bonuses and things like that, but on the whole, salaries are fixed and independent of posting. So there is a little bit of literature on this. My colleague Abhirup Mukhopadhyay, in his paper in Word Development in 2018, together with colleagues, did an empirical analysis of the teacher transfer problem in Haryana. And our paper is actually, the germ of the idea arose from discussions with him. And in that paper, they show that some simple mechanisms lead to better distribution. In terms of theory, there is a paper by Combe, Terciu, and another person who studied teacher transfers in France. But here the problem is slightly different because schools can only exchange teachers, right? So if a school sends out a teacher, it must actually also import a teacher. So this is not something that we are going to do. Okay, so basically what we do is that we set up a simple model, and then we show that it has a rather surprising implication in the sense that all sorts of objectives which you might think of as being disparate, distinct, actually reduce to the same thing in at least this model. So and from a technical point of view, it's an application of what we know or what is known as network flow analysis. So there's a set of schools and a set of teachers, with each teacher belonging to a single school, right? That's the current posting of the teacher. And for simplicity, this has absolutely, this is not a critical assumption at all. We assume that each school has a fixed number of students, right? So we abstract from the problem of ratios. It's just a problem of transferring teachers from one place to the other. And given the prescribed teacher-student ratio, the initial distribution of teachers may leave some schools with a surplus number of teachers, and other schools may run deficits. Okay? So, so we partition the set of schools into surplus schools and deficit schools, and a teacher transfer policy will transfer eligible teachers from surplus to deficit schools. But the key feature here is that we have what are called individual rationality constraints, so we don't want to transfer teachers against their will, nor do we want to, we also have some requirements which I shall describe in a moment about the surplus and deficit schools. So let me describe them, or let me actually put down some notations. The set of deficit schools is D, and beta of dk is the deficit of school dk. And the deficit vector is beta. The set of surplus schools is S. Alpha Sj is the surplus of school Sj, and the surplus vector is alpha. So there is a bunch of deficit schools, and each one comes with a number which is the deficit of that school. There is a set of schools which are a distinct set of schools which are surplus schools, and they come with a bunch of numbers which are the surplus teachers then. Okay, and okay, let's skip this notation, it's not particularly important. Teachers have preferences over deficit schools, right? So if you're a person who lives in a city, you may not want to be transferred to a school in a village. And here is the assumption that we make, which makes our analysis tractable and in fact, easy to formulate. So we assume that each teacher TI partitions the set of deficit schools into those which are acceptable and those which are not acceptable. Okay, so you have a very simple ranking, those which are acceptable and those which are not. It's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10. So, and we assume the following trichotomous preferences. So the first class is the set of all acceptable deficit schools. Then the second class is stay where you are. And the third class is all non-acceptable deficit schools. So you certainly don't want to be transferred to a place which you don't want to be transferred. And you might quibble a little bit about our second class. Why is it that you want to be transferred relative to staying where you are? Well, I mean, if you don't like that, it's easy to accommodate. It's not a problem. But we want to transfer as many teachers as we can. So we don't think this is unreasonable. So here are the things that transfer policy must satisfy. The first condition is that no surplus school can become a deficit school. Right? And likewise, no deficit school can become a surplus school after the transfer. Okay, so it cannot be the case that you take all the teachers from a surplus school and transfer them so that it now becomes a deficit school. So this is like an individual rationality constraint on surplus schools. You cannot transfer more than the surplus of that school. Okay, so this is an individual rationality condition for surplus schools, and of course you don't want to transfer too many people to a deficit school. That makes no sense either. And the other constraint is the individual rationality constraint for teachers, right? So no teacher can be transferred to a non-acceptable deficit school. That's not allowed, right? So this is just some notation for what a transfer is, what a transfer policy is. It's a set of teachers and where they are sent to, and it must satisfy these constraints which I just described. Okay, so okay. There's nothing more than what I just said a minute ago. So here is really the heart of our analysis. So we adopt what's called a network flow approach. So S1, S2 and S3 in this case are surplus schools, and small d1, small d2, small d3 are deficit schools. And what this picture shows us is that teachers T1, T2 and T3 belong to surplus school S1, and the lines emanating from a teacher, right, T1, T2, T3, T4, T5, T6, T7, the lines emanating from them to the various deficit schools tell you what their acceptable sets are. For instance, T5, the teacher T5 who belongs to S2 finds D1 and D2 acceptable but not D3. and T6 finds D2 and D3 acceptable but not D1, for instance. Okay? And now you may wonder what, so I've described teachers, I've described surplus schools, I've described deficit schools, but we've got two auxiliary or artificial nodes out here, one which we called a source node N0 and a sink node N infinity with these edges. N0 connects the edges to S1, S2 and S3, and N infinity is connected to D1, D2, D3, and we have these weights on these edges. So for instance, S2 has an edge going to N0 with the number 1 written to it, which says that S2 has a surplus of only 1. Okay? And S3 has a surplus of 2 and S1 has a surplus of 3. Likewise, D2, D3, D2 has a deficit of 2, D1 has a deficit of 2, D2 has a deficit of 3, and D3 has a deficit of 3 as well, right? If you follow that picture. Now, why do we introduce this source and sink node? Because it now enables us to formulate our problem in the classic network, in the network model. So what's the network model? The idea is that you imagine that this, you have to transfer water from the source to the sink through these intermediate nodes, and there are the point is that each intermediate node, in this case all the nodes except N0 and N infinity, the inflow must be equal to the outflow. Okay? And the maximum amount of flow on an edge is given by the weight on that edge. So for instance, let's take S2 and N0. Now there are two teachers who are in S2, but only one of them can be transferred, right? Because if you transfer 2, then there'd be each of the edges from S2 to T4 and S2 to T5 would be 1, and the outflow would be 2 and the inflow would be 1. So the idea of these edges from the source actually exactly captures the constraint that we want, that no surplus school should become a deficit school. You can't transfer more teachers, although they may want to go, you can't transfer them than the capacity of that edge, which is the surplus. Okay. Likewise, the sink node satisfies the same. You can't transfer more teachers to D1 than 2. Okay, although there are several people who want to go to D1, for instance, T1, T2, T3, T4, and T5 all want to go to D1, but you can't transfer all of them there because the outflow has to be 2. So only 2 guys can go there. Okay, so these weights exactly capture the constraints on the surplus and deficit schools, right? And the edges from teachers tell you they're acceptable sets of the acceptable schools. Okay, so what good does that all do? So what we are interested in is we want to find a good transfer policy. Now, what should a good transfer policy be? Okay, so obviously it has something to do with what you can make of the post-transfer deficit. So if we had schools with various deficits, we transfer some teachers, as many teachers as we can. We have many ways of doing this, and then we have a post-transfer deficit vector. Okay, so what is the post-transfer deficit vector that you want to achieve? Okay, so one goal could be, for instance, you want to transfer as many teachers as you want, as you can, sorry, as many teachers as is possible, given these constraints. You might say, okay, but that's not particularly desirable because this may end up transferring too many teachers to schools whose deficits are low, because you want to because you know, lots of people, you can push lots of people there, okay? So the heavy deficit schools remain heavy deficit schools post-transfer as well. On the other hand, you might take a sort of a very egalitarian approach, saying that I want to transfer as, you know, I want to make the deficit of the highest deficit school as low as possible. Having done so, I go to the second highest, etc., etc. So that's like an egalitarian objective. Okay? I could have all kinds of things. I mean, technically speaking, I could maximize, you know, I may want to find something which is the argmax of some concave function of post-transfer deficits, concavity, to reflect the fact that you have a concern for equality. Okay? So which one do we pick? And so here is our punchline, which I'm telling you before I'm actually getting to the slide. The punchline is that I can find a way to achieve all these things simultaneously. So there is no conflict between any of these objectives. In this model, I can find a way to achieve teacher transfers such that I can fulfill any of the criteria that I just outlined. Okay, so so as I said, most policy objectives can be reconciled. So what do I mean by most? So I came, we come to the, to this concept called Lorentz dominance, which many of you will be familiar with if you do analysis of income distribution. So, let this, I don't know how you call it, square brackets H be a reordering of the deficit vector from high to low. So we have a deficit vector, we just order them with the highest first, the second highest, etc., etc. And we say H star Lorentz dominates H if the following set of inequalities holds, that once I order these deficit vectors, then the Lorentz dominant vector beats every other vector in terms of the partial sum. So if I have one vector, so I have H star which has high to low ordered, then I have H which I order from high to low. So if H star is Lorentz dominant, then the highest deficit school there has a lower deficit than H. The sum of the first two highest deficit in H star is lower than the sum of the highest two in H, and so on and so forth, right? So Lorentz dominance, so there exists something, so this is the property of a Lorentz dominant, this is the property of a Lorentz dominant vector, and so the other two objectives that I outlined were maximality, that the sum of the elements of H star is greater, is lower than the sum for any other feasible transfer vector, and Lex optimality is that egalitarian thing that I found, compare the highest with the highest. If the highest is the same, go to the second, etc., etc. Now, a moment's reflection will tell you that if I can find a Lorentz dominant vector, it will be both maximal and it will be egalitarian. Okay? And in fact, it will have the, the maximization of, or the minimization of concave objective functions in exactly the way that I described. So, what is her result? Of course, the problem is that a Lorentz dominant vector may not exist, right? There is no reason for it to exist, right? If you think of standard welfare analysis, you have a utility frontier, okay? In the space of utilities of agents. So there's U1, there's U2, and you have some possibility frontier. If you have a utilitarian objective, you'll be trying to find the point on that frontier which maximizes U1 plus U2. There is no reason why the egalitarian one should give you the same point on the frontier, right? That will be the one on the 45-degree line. They may well be different. But in this model, it turns out they're all the same, right? Because I can find a Lorentz dominant post-transfer deficit vector. And not only can I find it, but I can, I can reconcile it with the, with incentives for the teachers to reveal their acceptable sets properly, right? Because otherwise you might be tempted to strategize, to say, look, I actually want to go to that school, but I could be better off by saying that I don't want to go there, I want to go somewhere else, and maybe the rule will somehow end up sending me there. So that is the notion of strategy proofness of our transfer policy, which I define, which it's not worth really spending too much time on. The idea is that I declare my acceptable set, and the others, teachers, declare their acceptable set. This is not known to the planner or to the government. Then the transfer policy assigns people to wherever they have to go, and it's strategy proof if I cannot do better than by misrepresenting my set of acceptable schools. Okay, so we want something which is strategy proof in this sense. And here is our result, the last slide. So there exists a Lorentz dominant post-transfer deficit vector H star for every teacher redistribution problem G. Moreover, there exists a strategy proof transfer policy that essentially implements this objective. Okay, so that's really the punchline here, and the idea, the analysis of this is also rather, I would say, a little surprising. So we follow some literature in the 1970s on networks, and so what you can do is that you can define a cooperative game in characteristic function when you have these multiple deficit schools, and then you show that this characteristic function is concave, and then the feasibility of flows in this model is related to what's called the anti-core, or let's put it differently, let's just change signs and say that the underlying game becomes convex, and if the underlying game is convex, then the underlying game is convex, and feasibility of flows in this setup is essentially corresponds to the inequalities which determine the core of this convex game, and thereafter we can impose some results, we can rely on some results on the core of convex games that were proved by Bhaskar Datta, one of the early recipients of this prize, and Debnath in a paper in Econometrica in 1991, and show that it has this sort of Lorentz property. And the final aspect of the proof is to take care of some integer problems, which are actually quite irritating here, because all the standard models deal with continuous flows. So we have to, because teachers are integers, so we have to do some work to actually make sure that the results still hold, and so on and so forth. So I think that's all I really wanted to say. So thank you again, and I'm deeply honored. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your elaborate presentation. We'll move on to our next awardee. We have Dr. Sugata Marjit. Sir is first distinguished professor at IIFT, Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, Kolkata. He was the RBA Professor of Industrial Economics and Director at the Center for Studies in Social Sciences, Calcutta. First, Sukhmay Chakravarti Professor at Center for Economic Studies and Planning, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. He is also former Vice Chancellor of Calcutta University. The research interest area includes political economy and informal credit market, wage fund theory in trade models, role of factor endowment in Dixit-Stiglitz-Krugman model of monopolistic competition and product diversity, education and underemployment. He has to his credit more than 150 papers published in reputed journals and books with international publishers, and more than 20 PhDs awarded under his supervision. He held visiting professional positions at the universities of Bonn, Berlin, Copenhagen, Cornell, Erasmus, Monash, etc. He has been a visiting scholar at the IMF and Federal Reserve Bank, St. Louis, USA, among other places. He was also awarded with Mahendra Gold Medal by the Indian Econometric Society in 2002, VKRB Rao National Prize as a Young Social Scientist in 2003, and in 2018 he was nominated as the Distinguished Visiting Fellow from Asia at the Queen Mary University of London. We welcome you, sir, to come over on the stage and kindly deliver your acceptance lecture.
So I can just speak a little bit and then I can share this. Okay. Thank you very much, the Indian Econometric Society. It is a rare honor and privilege to receive such a coveted award. In a generous way, by choosing me for the Mararaja Medal in 2002 and the Nagar Fellowship in 2020, TIES has recognized my lifetime work as an economist who has worked in India. And this TIS award basically spans my entire academic career. So the way I would like to present my acceptance speech, it would be in two parts. The first part would be certain, I would say, anecdotes and expressions which I don't get the opportunity to talk about. Because this is a very good place where people usually would not run away, and people usually are not looking for the theorems and results and data work or whatever, and captive audience is there. So I can express myself a little more freely, and I've earned this not only because I've got these 2 awards from this Econometric Society, but I am 65. So basically all of this allow me to share some of my thoughts which I've never been able to share with my, I think most of my individual friends, a lot of them are here, they understand what I'm saying, but that is important for somebody like me who want to share these views with you. And then I will present a short paper, and very short paper. Again, this paper would be just like a kind of a dessert after the main dinner, because it's just like a simple model related to the demise of very well-known economist Robert Solow, who happens to be my grand teacher because he was the supervisor of my supervisor. So I'm going to talk a bit about how do I relate my current research to this classical requiem for Robert Solow. So I'm going to talk a bit of that. I started my career with specialization in international economics. In course of time, I tried to publish in a host of areas and so on. And in fact, my students, not really the outsiders, tell me that that I'm spreading it too much. So basically, I write anything that attracts me. I write on that, which started with which includes papers like. I think I wrote a paper in EPW once on this transference of knowledge, like music knowledge by the guru or the ustad to his this thing, and guru's dilemma, that why the guru or the ustad doesn't want to give the best to the best disciple, and how the capital market imperfections create those kind of problems because guru cannot internalize the payoff from the best student when the student becomes famous. So basically that one, so my theoretical work, in fact, this theoretical work came out in EPW. So you see the contrasts, and this work was appreciated by Mr. Prof. Patnaik, which is which is even a contrast because I am sure Prabhada does not appreciate most of my work, but that's good. But then I also wrote papers on in nature and climate change. People tell me that what do you write on nature and climate change? It's a journal called Nature Climate Change, a big journal actually. Actually, I was not writing a paper on nature, on nature or on climate change. What I was doing, there were 15 or 18 scientists who were actually quarreling about that the whole world is spending too little on R&D on to control this kind of climate change issues, and then two groups got divided as to whether the developing countries should be given more money or the developed country should invest themselves more and so on. And suddenly I got this letter from this guy from Sweden to actually kind of arbitrate between these two groups by giving 2-3 paragraphs in economics where it makes sense, which the scientists cannot understand. So I wrote something about that sort on that, and suddenly I saw that my name came out in this journal. So I'm lucky in the sense that, like I've been lucky many times, it's not really once. Now the question is, after I returned from my PhD, doing my PhD from Rochester to Calcutta, I figured out very quickly that I cannot remain specialized in international trade because there are too many interesting things happening in India around me. So actually I should put my, whatever little theoretical knowledge I have acquired into everything and try to get some papers done. And at that time, I think I was very fortunate to get good patronage from top journals, and I could publish quite a bit. But actually, one thing was a nature that I think I cultivated, was that I used to always I looked for ideas and researches from my social neighborhood. So I have not written a single paper which is actually is now has exceeded 150 since the COVID period, because I had too much time to even write more papers, and I enjoy writing papers. And what I did actually, I could work on absolutely, the problems that are generated in my social neighborhood. Now, social neighborhood can be broadly defined as India, for example. It could be in West Bengal, it could be in my locality, my village, or India at large. And I never actually extended papers by anybody. This is something that I would like to share with you, that you would hardly find any paper that I wrote was actually a paper which is proving a different result from a very important paper. In fact, that actually now has happened for the first time when I'm 62 or 63. I'm actually, writing something like that, but I usually didn't do it. So I had problems of actually finding out citations and these things, but somehow I survived. But then there was another thing, that why I chose this thing, because I thought that not many people are working on this area, but interestingly, this it should not be treated as a claim of originality or super creativity. It is just like high self-respect and the identity I wanted to develop. Now, I have fantastic PhD students, fantastic non-PhD young guys in India who are interested in my work, and of course many friends and so on. A large number of people within India and outside India who helped me. Now, essentially, I have worked on quite a few things, but I'm going to talk a bit about some of my recent work, because I think I think people would be interested. And out of this list of recent work, I'm going to present a short paper later. So actually, in some of my recent theoretical work with Gauranga Das, Vishwajit Bondol, Nori Nakanishi, Reza Olavi and Lei Yang, I have tried to focus on the enduring utility of using the classical and neoclassical theories to understand modern dimensions of international trade. Let me briefly summarize what I have been trying to do. In my two recently published books, which is Marjit Mondol and Nakanishi in 2020, Springer Nature is called, I think, Virtual International Trade, the fourth dimension or something. And the very recent one, just a few months ago, the book has been published by Cambridge University Press on virtual trade in a changing world. What I did, basically the idea that is the core of this book has to do with that India being located in exactly opposite time zone of US. Virtual transactions involving business process of outsourcing can run 24/7, because when Indians wake up, the US people are going to bed, and when the US is waking up, Indian people are going to bed. So basically, the world can work for 24/7. So I was trying to look at just the location advantage of being located in two non-overlapping time zones can generate comparative advantage, as Ricardo thought in 1846, round about that time. The comparative advantage is affected by, because of this, of the possibility of engaging in the virtual transactions. This kind of separation of time zones adds to another dimension of comparative advantage. In fact, that is the core idea based on which some people have done some work, and these two books have come up. But the interesting part of my journey, whenever I wanted to publish something which I thought was reasonably original, was that it would be rejected by almost everybody. Which I think is that these days what happens is that that I don't think what I'm writing. If I think too much about saying that it's a very good piece of work, it's not going to be published. So what I have to think is that you go on writing, whether it will be published or not published, it is God's hand in that. But in this case, what happened? This idea was, I think, very exciting. In fact, when I found that this, there is a new interpretation of Ricardian comparative advantage, and I was very excited, and I immediately got sort of battered by a few journals. I had a roommate. Roommate means office mate, who was a legendary trade theorist. Of course, in his 70s or late 70s. His name was Mararaja. So Mararaja told me that this is a good piece of work, so don't get bogged down by the reports of these people who don't understand the worth of it. So you go ahead. So what I did, I kept on working, and then I figured out that. Then I actually found out that it was just like a miracle that after a few months I figured out that there are two persons in the University of Kobe in Japan who are actually following my working paper. And in fact, as some of you know who are aware of the Japanese funding system, JSPS is the Japan's NSF actually. So JSPS actually gave Kobe a huge grant to fund a research program based on my work, which continued for 10 years. And in fact, I am so much indebted to Toru Kikuchi, Nori Nakanishi, and University of Kobe. So basically, when one door closes, maybe the other doors open. So these are some of the interesting facets of my life I wanted to say, because I think serious academics is always struggle, and it is struggle because people who are I would say not inadequately connected in the system. For them, it is very much of a struggle. I can't even imagine the young, fresh, PhD scholars today when they want to publish a paper in decent journal, how much obstacle they have to face. So these are some of the things I faced. And the last point I would like to make about my current research, I have found that in economics, in the standard microeconomics or macroeconomics, we are far and distant from the financial part of the discipline. That is, we don't actually teach our students anything to do with how finance actually affects production, finance affects allocation of resources, trade or growth or whatever, because we implicitly assume that either financial markets don't matter, or we have credit markets which are perfect in the sense that I can borrow and lend at a given rate of interest, and since I am an atomistic supplier, borrower or whatever, I don't care. But the fact is that, separating finance from economics does not give the right perspective to the young students. I think there should be ways where you can introduce finance at a very early stage, because finance is the core of business and economics. So what I did is that I look, what can I do with this idea? So because I'm a trade theorist, so what I did, I looked at the 4-5 core trade models like Ricardian model, specific factor model, Hectorolin model, Krugman's product variety models, and then of course the farm heterogeneity models. So for each of these models, I started including a kind of a substructure which is finance or which is financial capital. So I introduced financial capital in the standard general equilibrium model of production and trade. And then I wanted to see to what extent this inclusion alters the fundamental results. Does it alter the results that we know of, or it tells us something interesting? And the general idea is, and the general outcome is, and of course, here also I am writing papers with Gaurango Das and Nori Nakanishi mainly, and also two of my PhD students of Meghna Datta in IIT Patna and Moshakira and Siliguri. What we are trying to do is basically try to look at when finance becomes pivotal. You see, very interestingly, this effort takes me to a world where I can find the interrelationship between macroeconomics, financial economics and international trade, because I believe that all of these are intertwined in some ways, but we have to understand how they are related. These are not separate, all the time separate categories, but you have to understand the inherent links between these two. So basically what you can guess, some of you, definitely you are mature economists, so you guess that the idea of finance not doing anything to the system comes up very nicely when the market conditions are very ideal. So their finance is truly a veil, as we thought about in quantitative theory of money or anywhere. So finance is just like a veil under which we do all kinds of real transactions. But once you bring in imperfect product market, imperfect credit market, or unemployment, or any kind of distortion, finance becomes pivotal. Because then you see that the stocks of finance, increase or decline in the stocks of finance are going to create, very interesting impact on this issue. So it tells us that we need to understand finance and the role of finance in these kind of structures. Now, as I was following Arunava's remarks on, because he was taught by Professor Nagar and then he did not take any econometrics courses, and he said that, so I am not too far from him. I am even far and distant from him because he's never met Professor Nagar, but a little ahead of him because I actually took econometrics qualifier by studying econometrics at Rochester. And then immediately as I heard him, what I was trying to do, I was trying to figure out in the last 5 years if I have written a paper in which there is econometrics. And I found out that there are 3 papers, but these 3 papers, all the econometric work have been done by the co-authors. So I have not done it, but I have published something. And just to mention, 2, because one of them is actually, the theory part is mine, but the econometric part is about 80%, which has been done by Viramani and his student. So these days, I have found that there is a great way of actually doing research is actually to lease in talents, so basically in the sense that, I motivate Viramani sometimes, I motivate somebody, who's very smart in econometrics sometimes to see if these guys actually have an interest in what I'm saying. Sometimes it works, and actually when it works, it does very good. So basically, this paper is a good paper. It has just come out in Journal of Policy Modeling, in which we show that trading final goods actually do not contribute to growth. So the growth augmenting effect is in trading intermediates. So basically we take this argument from Ricardo's famous book, in which he says that foreign commerce would increase your enjoyment, but that does not mean it is going to increase the rate of accumulation. So basically there is a difference between gains from trade and gains from growth. So, and gains from growth in the sense that when you trade, the growth rate actually increases. So this is one part of this of the topic of trade and growth that recently, of course, I give all this credit to Viramani and his student that we proved that. And there is another paper in 2016, and I wrote something. I also wrote a bit of papers in experimental economics with a few co-authors in European Economic Review, where we talk about whether the development, whether if the Hindus and Muslims are two separate communities, then whether having a bigger Hindu community means that the Muslims are getting much more consolidated in terms of forming collusive, groups, or if the Muslims are there, the dominant community, whether the Hindus are doing it. And this had like 2 to 3 kind of methodologies that we followed in terms of understanding what is happening in the backward districts of West Bengal, at least, because there are some backward districts has this kind of significant Hindu-Muslim presence. And one of the methods of course experimental, but then there are also some econometric work, and we find that the general conclusion was that if there is, this was in the context of whether the development process is biased, but we found that when a district is developed, then both communities are very happy. When the districts are not developed, they are not happy. There is nothing going on in terms of this kind of bias. So this completes my first part. And how many minutes I have taken? Can anybody tell me?
I think in another 2 minutes.
Okay, so I took most of my minutes. So let me just tell you what I have done. I'm not going to show you that paper, but I'm going to tell you about a paper that I wrote recently. It had to do with a classical requiem for Robert Solow. As I said, that the last section of my research is about financial economics. So what I did, instead of Solow's model, where he considers very well-known, CRS and diminishing marginal product, I take complete classical view. So I take a wage fund model, in which there is a finance, stock of finance, the wage fund. It employs workers. So basically you have to employ workers, give them the payments, and only then production takes place. Then after it is sold, you pay back the interest rate and the principal to the financier. So role of capital here is the financial capital. Now if you consider this model, then you can prove both Solow's existence of the steady state growth and the stability of steady state growth in few lines. You don't require the assumption of diminishing marginal productivity, Cobb-Douglas production functions or CRS production function, and whatever we have studied about Solow's growth model. So essentially what I'm trying to say, if David Ricardo could time travel, he could have taken few moments of Solow's time and could have said that you have a great idea and great theorem, but I can prove it 10 times simpler than what you do. And in that case, what happens is we don't need any production theory to actually prove Solow's growth model. This is what I have done, and I would love to share this with you, which is a very simple, model which even an undergraduate economist can understand. And I can request the organizers here, whoever is interested, you can circulate that paper to them. So again, thanks to everyone in TIES, and in fact, I had a long list of people whom I want to acknowledge, but that would be more than 2 minutes, because I think even I could cut short that list, but this list keeps on increasing, because I have been benefited by so many people. In fact, there are so many people present here, like I have a teacher present here, Vishwajit Chatterjee. I remember he was my kind of the first lecturer I met in Presidency College, who was very happy to share his new books with his students, a student of international trade, who actually understood very little about international trade. But I used to go to his house, and he was so generous to give me absolutely, nicely scented new books of international trade. So this is something like that, and all these great teachers like Professor K. Krishna, whom I was not fortunate enough to be associated with, has been so generous, because there are many events he knows, I know, where he has been instrumental in sort of my selection of, into some very eminent positions and so on and so forth. And so many good friends like that I can see here, TCA, Ajit, we had evening walks when Ajit was far less famous. And evening walks about economic problems in this dark load-shedding nights of Indian Statistical Institute. And TCA has been a great colleague in different capacities, and also TCA however like 2.5 hours different from Cornell and Rochester for a while. And PG Babu, another great friend of mine. And I'm sorry if I'm not uttering the names of everyone. Mr. Bolda. We had great moments at IEG in discussing lots of issues, and I am so much indebted to all of you. And of course, Delhi ISI guys, Arunava, when he even contemplated to write a paper with me, which is absolutely, I think, could have been disastrous for him because my mathematics and Arunava's mathematics are like, we don't make comparisons, but he also used to talk about his problems with me, which is, I think, is a very important kind of thing. And all these, ISI folks at that time, Dilip, Debnath, Bhaskar, Barman, Subhashish, everyone. So we have Joydev Shasmal here, with whom I always discuss about the fine things about economics and the disasters, and great friend. So I am very happy, Mahendra and Mr. Barman, all these acquaintances, and I am truly cheerful that TIES finds me worthy of receiving.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing the life journey on this occasion. We have the local organizers who would like to felicitate both the awardees as well as Barman sir. I request Subramanian sir to kindly come on stage to felicitate R.B. Barman sir. I request Dr. Arunava Sen to kindly come on stage.
Sir.
Thank you, sir. I request Dr. Sugata Marjit sir kindly come on stage. Thank you so much, sir. We are done with these sessions for today. I thank the dais and all the participants and the respected dignitaries of the dais to join us for the program, who were part of this program for the whole day. Now, I think we'll call it a day.